Welcome back to another episode of the Odd or God Pod, where we talk about sobriety, spirituality, and everything in between. This week, very special episode. We've got a close, dear friend of mine, someone who's seen the best and worst sides of me and decided to stick around regardless. Everyone help me welcome James to the podcast.
My bad. Hi, guys. My name is James. My sobriety date is 7/24 of 2018. I'm really grateful to be here tonight. I'm grateful for you putting this on, big guy. Yeah, I have seen the best and the worst.
Super happy to have you. James, fun fact for you guys listening or watching, on my last little run there, about every 3 weeks I would show back up to a certain spot on Friday nights, and I would see, because I knew I'd see James there, and I would give him a sob story about I just can't do this anymore, I need your help, and he would text me like any good person would, and then I would bail on him, and then about a month later I would come back and give him the same sob story. And let me tell you something, there's a testament to James. He answered the call every single time.
Oh, stop.
It's true. It's true. I did this for about 4 months, and every single time he always shot me a text, offered to reach out, offered to help me out. And, I just wasn't at that point yet where I actually wanted to accept that help. But when I did finally find my way back, he's been here, and it's like we never skipped a beat, man.
Exactly. And, the thing is that you kept coming back. That was the most important part, is because a lot of the time it's like we go out once and then we're done. So, but there was that, I saw that real drive and that pull from you, it was just, you were either going to go one way or the other, but I get it, man. We all been there, but you've come a long way. Look at you with your Odd or God Pod.
Yeah, we're in the humble abode. As you can see, this is our 6th different studio that we've shot an episode in. We're in the garage, which is cool. We'll call it the garage sessions maybe, but let's just kind of get into it, man. I've got a lot of really cool things that I kind of want to talk about, from everything from, that experience that we just touched on to walks in the dog park. I mean, you've been part of my journey for some time now, man, and I'm just super excited that you decided to come on the pod and share some of your story with us. So
I'm excited. I'm excited to be here, and I got to be a part of your journey. It's always been a privilege. So.
Well, take it away, man. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now?
All right. Well, it's funny because I'm wearing this awesome rad Dare shirt. I don't know if it's getting picked up, but that's fine. But I grew up, man, in a real small town in Northern California. Shout out to Lake Tahoe.
LT.
Yeah, exactly. The dirty 530, as we call it. But I grew up there, man. I had normal parents, except one was a psychologist and the other was a drug and alcohol counselor, and ran the main drug and alcohol treatment kind of stuff. So I grew up super involved in DARE. It was all about Nancy Reagan, just say no, and I told myself I was never going to do drugs, I was never going to drink, I was never going to do that stuff because, crack is whack, and
say nope to dope.
Exactly. I just didn't think I needed to, but then as growing up, you start, I went from being pretty involved to slowly growing into an awkward nerd, and so needing those friends and everything. I remember the first time I took a drink, it was just this blizzard out, right? And some of these kind of popular kids, popular for a 450 kid school, but they were considered the cool kids and stuff, and they're walking by my house, and they were like, "Hey man, why don't you come hang out with us?" And I was like, "Oh shoot, this is my moment," And so I went and hung out with them. I did 2 shots of Sky vodka with them, and I just remember instantly, I was like, "Wow, this makes me feel pretty good," But for me, it was it wasn't all of a sudden then I started doing drugs and doing all the habitual stuff, right? it was definitely a slow burn for me. And so then, I just kept going along. I graduated high school and everything, but then I started moving around, right? And for whatever reason, I just couldn't stop that life, And as I was going through, I started, my friends were starting to like get careers and get families and get lives and stuff. And I'm like living in Hawaii saying like, let's go do mushrooms on the beach, and just like getting 40s of Steel Reserve, Blackberry Steel Reserve comes later on as the title of this episode.
Yeah,
but
a little foreshadowing.
Yeah, exactly. But
so you started out with just Steel Reserve.
Well, it was just real light alcohol, I was definitely a pothead through and through, and I was kind of, I dabbled in everything, I had my Coke moments, had my perk moments, I had, but, for the most part, it was like my true loves was always weed and booze, whatever it was just, that hit the spot for me, and so I started bouncing around all over the country because like, I would get somewhere and eventually like, it would just, my time would run out there. And so somebody usually my best friend would say, hey, come out to where I'm at and get back on your feet, So I lived in Pensacola, Florida. I lived in Atmore, Alabama. I lived in Honolulu, Hawaii. I lived in Reno, Nevada, like all over the place, And every time I was getting on the airplane, I would sit there and I'd say, I'm going to leave that James behind, I'm going to be super like mysterious when I go to the bar, and I'm not going to be this awkward weirdo and stuff, and I'm going to get the girlfriend, I'm going to get the job, I'm going to get the house, I'm going to get the kids, I'm going to do all this stuff, right? And the wildest thing would happen is I would get on that airplane and I would take off and then I would land, and for whatever reason, every single time I was waiting for myself at the gate, And so I found out real quick that they sell black velvet whiskey at Atmore, Alabama, just like they do in Honolulu, Hawaii. It doesn't matter where I went, right? And then as things progressed, I was really good at manipulating the easiest people to manipulate, which is our family. So like throughout the entire time, I'm sitting there hitting up my mom and my dad for MoneyGram. Let me get some food. And it's like food's the last thing on my mind at the time. Yeah. And if you're listening to this and you've ever had to use MoneyGram, you are listening to the right podcast, because normal people don't know they're like, what is MoneyGram? Anyway, but eventually, I moved to Phoenix. I hated it here. The first thing I wanted to do when I got here was leave, and so I just, that's when I really progressed to the downturn. And that's when it was like, I was a daily drinker, but now it was like, I was waking up with that obsession, that crushing anxiety. And then I remember not wanting to go home every night I would try to find things to do, go to friends' houses, go to the park, do something, right? Because my couch meant death. It meant that once I got there, I was going to be there and no one was going to give a crap about me, And it sucked, man. And then that's when the arrests started happening. Got arrested in Boulder City, Nevada. And then I got arrested out here, That's when I did some prison time. That was wild for me. It was only 4 months. I don't think I'm super hardened criminal over here. But
4 months is some time.
It's weird, I
did 10 days in jail, and I thought, I know what it's like.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because, I remember, man, when I was in prison, I called my mom, right? And, I'm listening to the Priya little message that plays and everything, and I'm sitting there and I'm talking to my mom, and she tells me for the first time in 18 years she's happy and she can sleep at night, right? Because she knows where I am. And I got so angry at her. I was like, Mom, I'm in prison! look at me, like I don't do well in this, you know. But the fact is that she knew where I was, which was a testament to how far I had gotten, you know. And then after that, man, it was still another couple years. It wasn't until I was living under a barn. I was working at Dollar Tree. It wasn't like a barn, but it was like, it was, you know, there was horse stalls next to where I lived, and like on the same kind of thing.
That would be a barn.
That would be, yeah. I mean, the upper half was a house, and then I was in this room with this couple. I was paying rent with food stamps. We did have a bathroom, and we did have a fridge and an oven. But I actually was sleeping on this cot underneath the countertop. And yeah, and my probation officer came. He took one look at the place and said, "You got to get out of here, man." So he sent me to the Salvation Army. I had failed some drug tests, you know. I did not realize that the alcohol drug test, you know, the alcohol tests go back like 4 days now.
The ETG test.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
like, I think it's like 80 hours or something.
It's ridiculous. And like I was sitting there and I was like doing all of the detox myths, you know, like drinking like baking soda. I was doing
the niacin.
The copious amounts of vinegar, apple cider vinegar, the copious amounts of Emergency, and then like 50 gallons of water to try to flush. None of it worked, you know. And so yeah, and then I got sent to the Salvation Army, and you know, I did that. You know, the first year of my sobriety or so. I mean, I was there for 6 months. I had a few months, and then I relapsed on some weed, you know, and then immediately came back.
Did you go back to the Salvation Army a second time, or
no? So actually, it was funny. My first sponsor, he was we were driving home from a meeting, and I lived way out on like 35th Avenue in Thunderbird, and our meeting was.
Yeah, that's not a great area.
No. I mean, it was a good spot for like for a halfway house, you know. It's not this, but our meeting was on like McKellips and McDowell or Thomas, somewhere around there, and he was driving me home. I just smoked weed like the night before or something, and he was like telling me how great of an example of AA I was, and how awesome I was doing in sobriety and stuff. And like midway there, I was just like, I'm a fraud. I smoked weed. I'm a terrible person, blah, 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 you know. And so we just got back to work right then and there. And then that was 7/23, last time I smoked, you know, and 7/24 of 2018. But that first year, like, man, I was purely staying sober out of spite and people pleasing, you know. Like, it wasn't like some magical thing happened to me or whatever. I just did not know how to say no to my first sponsor, you know. I was terrified of him, and he had these crazy eyes. And like, so he would look at you and be like, "How's it going, James?" And I'd be like, "I'll tell you everything," you know. But yeah, that first year, you know, and then as things progressed, you know, I went through some changes, went through a major change during my third year, where I had been dating a girl for 3 years and ended up breaking up with her, and that's you know, a couple months before that, I left my first home group, and it was
that's around the time that I had met you.
Yeah, that was right,
like 2020-ish or 2021-ish, I think. Somewhere around there.
Well, it was late 2021, because that's when I started going to my current home group, Friday Night Lights, you know. And it was weird, man, because I came from a group that was very intense AA, saved my life 100%, like taught me all of the things I needed to, you know. But the cool part about sobriety is that we're able to grow and change, and it's always this progress and not perfection, and that evolving relationship with whatever higher power you have, you know. And so I think too often we get stuck in the same spot, and then we build those resentments, and then we end up blaming everyone else, you know, instead of just saying, hey, I need to I need to change. Instead of removal, it's just adjusting, you know. And so then met my second sponsor, man, and changed how I basically did everything. And it was insane how different the first 2.5 years of my sobriety was to the next 2.5 years, you know. So that's where I'm at. That's how I got here.
Dude, it's super cool to hear your story. I've heard like bits and pieces, but I've actually been looking forward to kind of sitting down and hearing like a full uninterrupted like share.
Oh, that's still the way abridged version. I cut out years just to like, because I don't know, like I wanted to, like, I don't want to just sit here and just like rattle off all of this.
Right. It's like at some point, let's arrive to the solution.
Exactly.
And I appreciate it. We kind of like to stay in the pocket, but it is always nice hearing a little bit of the backstory, man. And I've heard other little bits and pieces myself. But like one thing that I remember very, very like distinctly about you is like from the very first time I met you, like I always like had this thought in my head, like I need to like know this guy.
Aw.
Like no, not even like that. Like I like something in my head was like, you need to work with this guy.
Yeah.
Like this guy has the solution that you need.
Yeah.
I always knew that, but at that point in my life when I had met you, I was so caught up in like these personal ambitions of what I thought I wanted my life to be, and like all of these things. And I did eventually ask you to work with me, and we worked together for a while.
Yeah.
And I remember, and this is probably my favorite like aspect of you, is that you saw like what I was at that point in my life. And I would tell you, like, I had, like, this fantasy of, like, being alone on, like, this, like, you know, and, like, all of these things, right, that I thought that's what I would want in my life. And you started just picking me up, and you would take me to, like, walk your dogs, dude. Yeah. And, like, why don't you pick up the story from there?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think that for a lot of us alcoholics and addicts, right, is that, I mean, one of the basic things that we struggle with is living in the present, you know? And I think that, like, I saw a lot of myself in you with that kind of stuff, was that it was always being in the future. Once I meet these certain terms and conditions, then I'm going to be happy within myself. You know, once I become rich and powerful, once I get that right job, once I get this specific thing, you know, that's when I know I'm going to be happy, right? And it needs to come from a different spot. And part of that comes from living in the present, you know, because it shows you how to have that gratitude for right this second, right? And so what we would do, and it would absolutely, we'd sit there and butt heads throughout the entire time, but we would pick up my dogs from my ex, and then we'd go down to the dog park and just walk around. And you would be going on about just different things going on in your life, you know. And this is where I was appreciating my sponsor at the time, because he was just sit and listen to him, you know. And it was a real lesson in control and presence for me, right? Because I just wanted to shake you and be like, stop thinking this way. That's it. Like, you're done, you know? But I couldn't, you know? And so, but taking you to the dog park, because, like, for me, that was a spot where it's like all of this stuff, especially at that time, there was all of this stuff going on in the world and everything, like with Ukraine, and like there was just all this political stuff going on and everything. And, you know, we were at the dog park, and I would sit there and I'd look at all these people, right, and these dogs, and nobody's thinking about anything outside of that dog park at that moment. You know, everybody is just living in that moment and just appreciating a bunch of happy little dogs just running around, you know, and doing their thing, you know. And those dogs don't care about what's going on outside of that. They're right there, you know. And so it's that lesson in like almost like, don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff, you know. Like, anything outside of my control, like, I'm not going to be able to do anything, so I might as well just sit there and enjoy watching these dogs enjoy themselves, you know. And it's tough. It's tough because our mind just wants to escape that, right? It's that simplicity is too much for us because, man, I want to control every aspect of everything that's going on, you know? I want to meet those terms and conditions, and by me being at this stupid dog park right now, I'm not able to achieve those terms and conditions, you know? When really the terms and conditions were right there all along, right? Is that it was two alcoholics talking about living life sober, surrounded by people that had no idea about who they were, what they were doing, why they were there, right? And they were just going about their lives, you know? And so it's still one of my favorite moments that I've had in my sobriety as well, you know, is that being able to remember those walks and him trying to help me out with my Tinder. And it did not go very well, by the way.
Yeah, that was an era. That was a different era of my life. And when I look back on it, I see so clearly on what you were trying to like do. Yeah. Right. But in that moment, I just remember there were some times where I was just furious.
Oh yeah.
I was like, bro, you're not understanding. I need you to help me. I was like, I need you to fix these problems in my life, and all you're doing is walking me in circles around this like dusty dog park and telling me to like be here. And I'm like, I need something more, you know?
And I mean, that comes with that shield of self, right? As those blinders, is that like, this is about me instead of the moment, you know? And that happened to me. I remember I had multiple moments with my sponsor where like, I was going through it. That day I had gone through that breakup, and like, I remember calling my sponsor, and we went and got a burger and stuff. And I was like, I was just all over the place mentally and emotionally and stuff like that, you know, just made this huge change and everything. And I just remember me and my sponsor talking and stuff. And like, I was like crying and stuff. And I was like, does it ever get easier? You know, because I was so focused on self, right? And he was like, no. It doesn't get easier, but it gets easier to handle. You know, life doesn't get easier just because you get sober, right? It's just that we get these spiritual tools that we learn to pick up at the right time. But I was pissed at him when he said that. I was like, that's not loving. I want you to coddle me right now. I want you to tell me this, like, that I'm going to be okay and all of this stuff. You know, I had that shield of self without realizing that, like, he was giving me what I needed to hear, you know? So, but those dog park moments, man, really, like, I look back with a lot of fond memories. And the thing is that the cool part is having, like, one of those gifts of sobriety, right, is being able to have those kind of moments and, like, juxtapose those with those next few months that we interacted and now looking at you, right? It's like, it's this awesome, like, when they talk about it as a recovery journey, that's where I love that stuff, because I'm like, that's your recovery journey, you know, is that you went from this to that to this to that, and now you're here doing podcasts in a garage.
Right. Yeah, and it's it is so true, because you know, just a little bit of like a backstory. It's like, at that point, like looking back on that point in my life, that was I was like a little over a year sober at that point, and I shared this on a couple of episodes ago, but like that's where all of those, like, where I can no longer accept life on life's terms. I'm becoming irritable with situations because they're not suiting me the way I feel like they need to be suiting me. And I'm starting to pinpoint all of these things in my life. And even though it took an additional 10 months or so after that until I like finally succumbed to like going back into another one of those cycles, you know, it had started all the way back at that point, right? Where it's like I had reached that milestone and no longer was like resting satisfaction with like anything in my life. And so I just started chasing after like professional accomplishments, all these online dating profiles, like all of these things that I thought were going to bring me what I was looking for. And it's like, it started all the way back then, right? And I would imagine you saw it too.
I mean, It's funny because we think that we're so coy when we're like going through that stuff, you know. We think that like people don't really see it, you know, and we're just like, we usually have that idea that I'm smarter than everyone else, you know. And when you're going through it, man, you're just going through it, you know. At the end of the day, like, it's that lesson of control, was that I knew that you had to go through what you needed to go through, right? Just like I had to go through what I had to go through. And anyone that's sober, like, that's one of the greatest gifts but toughest burdens that we have, is having, especially people we get super close to, right? Like, because I loved chatting with you, I loved hanging out with you, and having to just say, look, like, he's not ready. I have to let, you know, like, no amount of what I say, what I do, you know, no amount, I could hit you with the best philosophical deep thought, right? And that may help you for 5 minutes, but your mind was already made up at that point. You were just delaying the inevitable, but you came back. So why did you come back?
You know, it's funny because I did share this a little bit as well on a previous episode, but it's, you know, I was no longer convinced that I was an alcoholic. I was becoming like restless, irritable, discontented.
Yeah, but what brought you back?
Well, here's the deal.
Oh, all right.
So I go back out, right? And the main thing, the main thing that sticks out to me this last time around is that the entire 9 months of me being back out there, doing what I was doing, I was just chasing, praying that next drink or whatever it was going to give me that sense of ease and comfort that I had known it to give me at some point in my life. Yeah. And it never did, right? And I found myself, you know, on a Thursday morning, and I had successfully I was like using FMLA at my work, but I didn't actually, I was just pretty much just like leading him on to like go on this little vacation, and I'm just been hung up in this apartment. And
pizza boxes everywhere.
Yeah, you know, it's bad, right? And I remember that day, my roommate at the time, who also, you know, had his own, you know, struggles, needed a ride home from the hospital, and it was like 9 a.m. and I'm already hammered. Yeah. And I go and pick him up from the hospital, and I'm trying to tell him he has a problem. I'm like, dude, you need to figure your shit out. Like, this is unacceptable, right? And on my way home, and I knew that afternoon that it was done. My boss caught on to me, called me. They came to my apartment, picked up all my company property and stuff. Like, I was done. Yeah. Right. And so then, you know, there's Paul, who was on an episode last week.
Good old Paul.
Yeah. You know, he runs a meeting at the church that I was baptized at, and it's on Thursday nights. And so I went to that meeting, and what brought me back was that it says in some literature that we read in recovery that, you know, most alcoholics need to be pretty mangled before they can wrap their head around the concept that self-knowledge alone is not sufficient enough for me.
Avails us nothing.
Self-knowledge avails me nothing, right? And no matter how much I knew about alcoholism, no matter how much I knew or what I learned about myself through the previous 2 years that I had of sobriety, it wasn't sufficient enough, and I just internalized that powerlessness that I had, and that I had no defense against the next drink, and there was nothing in this world that was going to save me, and I knew in my heart, like, I needed to come back, and I needed to reestablish a spiritual way of living, and much like you. My story, my first time around, was a lot of, I think my ego and pride kept me sober more than a spiritual connection with my higher power. I was introduced to this community, and I made really good friendships with people, and I had some time, which I thought gave me some clout in the game. And that what was driving me to stay sober for the majority of that time.
Oh, it's that praise and stuff, or we're just getting high off of feeling like a big shot in sobriety, you know. And I remember you coming to that meeting, you had your group of friends, and you had like, everyone loved you, everyone would like pick you and cheer for you and all this stuff, and that's really good. But what happens after those, you know, those those friends after rehab, and you guys start moving away and you start living your own lives and stuff. Like, how are you going to develop that community? So I get that.
Yeah, man. And so what brought me back this time was just that true understanding of, my disease, and that being able to like to my innermost self, like understand that, I am an alcoholic, and that, nothing is going to help me other than this spiritual program of action, right? And that there is a design of living for me to wake up every day and participate in order to give me the best chances against that next drink. And this time around, I've cut ties with that, a lot of that friend group that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I've had to make some tough decisions that, I felt like they were keeping me, or being barriers between truly living a spiritual life and like truly being a part of what we have going on. And it's been wild, man.
Yeah.
But that's what brought me back. And
I can appreciate that.
And it's just it's crazy, because I look at who I used to be, and there's still people that I'll see since like coming back around this time, and I just genuinely do not feel like I'm the same person that I was for all those years. Like it's
complete
just,
psychic change, right?
Yeah.
Is that? Well, and go ahead. Sorry.
I would love to hear. What you
okay.
have to say.
So, well, but like, is that like we get confused with that sufficient substitute that the book talks about, right? Is that a lot of the one of those things that happens to us is, especially in early recovery, is that we get a bunch of shit back, right? And I can cuss, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. See, I've been not cussing for the sake of like being nice, so I'm gonna say shit.
Yeah.
But
well,
anyway.
let's not overdo it.
Oh, okay. I got my 5 in, so that's okay. But
there's a certain limit of F-bombs before we have to restrict the video.
Okay, I haven't used the F-bomb yet. I don't think so. But I'll keep it. But is that we get all this stuff back, right? And so we confuse that as like we're feeling good, we're on that pink cloud, everything's going really well, and so we think that we found that sufficient substitute, right? When really that's still all materialistic things, right? And it's those friendships and stuff like that are really good, but what happens when they leave, right? And so having that connection to a higher power and being able to feel something greater, right? And like, it was funny when you were talking about the self-knowledge availing us nothing, right? Like for a couple years leading up, like I knew I was an alcoholic. Like I would joke about it, right? It'd be like 1:30 and I'd be at a house party and I'd be like, hey guys, time to go. Like we got to go to Circle K before they close, But I remember talking to my dad. He's this psychologist has practiced for like 50 years or something, and I remember this was before I got sober, I was doing IOP and stuff, and I was talking to him about it, and I was like, this whole disease concept is like ridiculous, right? Like there's no way, like I know I'm an alcoholic, it's all a willpower thing, right? Because I thought like this guy, cognitive behavior therapist and stuff, like he knows the mind and everything. He's going to agree with me because I'm so smart, And he was like, absolutely not. It's totally a disease. And like, if, somebody with a heart disease stops taking their medication, they're going to have a reaction, And he's like, recovery's got to be your heart medication. And I was so angry at him. I was like, how dare you not validate me, right? This is not a disease. And turns out
it turns out you're just like the jaywalker,
Exactly, 100%. And the funny part is that like we try to convince ourselves a million different ways, that I'm not like other people, right? I'm so unique. I'm going to get through this. I'm going to do this and that. And in the end, like, here I am in a garage on a Wednesday night, because this is what I need to do. That's the sufficient substitute, right? Is that it's in moments like this where I see my higher power come out, right? When I got that text from you or your call and you had said, I've left my apartment. I've left everything. I'm moving into a halfway house with absolutely nothing. And I was like, wow, right? That's that sufficient substitute coming out, right? That's where I see my God start appearing, you know, because, man, the deck is stacked against us, right? From the moment we're born, it's like, it is so stacked against us. And here it's like there's no reason for us to be alive, you know, except for life, right? Except for two alcoholics in the 30s sitting there talking about how much they hate being alcoholics, you know, like,
yeah, finding common ground, examining their lives and being like, this seems like this is a pattern.
Yeah.
Like, I'm recognizing a pattern with all of us, so here's what we could potentially do to solve it.
Exactly. Like, that's why, like, whenever I get sponsees now, I wish I had done this more with you, but is like, I hammer in the fact that the first word of the first step is we, right? Is that I need you guys. I need my sponsor. I need my sponsees. I need Friday Night Lights. I need all of these different things, right? So that for a few minutes, because I go out and I talk, you know, I'm in a corporate world and I talk to corporate people, and I go and I talk to my girlfriend that's a non-alcoholic, and I talk to my parents that are non-alcoholics, and like for just 5 minutes, I need to not feel so bat crap crazy, right? And just talk to somebody and like talk to my sponsor and be like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And he just laughs at it, you know? I say whatever it is to someone else, they're going to be like, what the hell is wrong with you, you know? And so that's that sufficient substitute, right? It's these moments that, especially as alcoholics, we know what true loneliness feels like, right? And so it's like, for us to not feel so alone for just 5 minutes, you know, because most of the time we're not relapsing because we want to go drink and you know, do whatever for the next year or 5 years or 10 years or whatever, you know. We're just wanting that feeling to stop for 15 minutes.
Right. Yeah, we're trying to just chase that ease and comfort that we had once known.
That's quick, right? And the book tells us is that we drink because we like the effects. We know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because it's like, I never truly understood that. And I kind of touched on this before, but I truly feel that if the relapse that I had, and that was one of the biggest like blessings I think that I've had, looking back at what my life is today, because I was able to fully identify, to kind of piggyback of what you were just saying, where it's just like, I now know that I like the effect produced by alcohol, to the point where it'll become my great obsession that somehow, some way, I am gonna be able to drink like a normal man. I'm gonna be able to drink without consequence, right? And when that obsession is in my mind, I cannot with sufficient force bring back any of those past tragedies, right? And I can't fully understand or remember what it was truly like, because I am just so hyper fixated on that obsession of like, I can just somehow, some way, I'm going to manage this so that I can get that effect produced by alcohol, right? And I'm going to chase that into the gates of insanity or death. And like, it's that simple, but it's not that simple, you know?
Well, it's that opening of the door, right? Like, I remember reading that part, and I was like, man, all of my existential reasons have been taken away, you know? Now I know it's not because of something my parents did. It's not because something the girlfriend did. It wasn't because something the job did. It wasn't because I'm not meeting these certain terms and conditions. It's none of that, right? It's the fact that I like to drink, you know? That's it. I like the sense of ease and comfort. That line you quoted about not being able to recall with sufficient force, right? I love that line, because non-alcoholic people go through like one or two painful things. Like, they get a DUI, they're like, I'm going to take an Uber from now on, you know? But like, for us, and like, we remember it. We remember all of that pain, all of those times I was army crawling into my mom's room to steal from her purse. You know, I remember every time I got into a fight with a girlfriend. I can remember all of those shameful, embarrassing, terrible things. but it never was enough for me to stop, right? And like one of my favorite aspects, right, of knowing all of that, right, is that as alcoholics and addicts, like, we get totally blessed with being able to live 2 lives, right? Is that we went through all of that stuff. We went through that pain, that misery, that beating down, that just, that selfishness, that self-centeredness, that living on the streets, being in jails, institutions, stuff like that. There's all of this stuff, right? And then, weirdly, we get to live a normal life, right? And so it's like, I got to experience that life, and I get to experience this life, and like the ties that kind of tie it together, but also like feeling like it was 2 separate lives I've lived, know? And I've seen the 2 separate lives that you've lived, and remembering some of those stories, that's the crazy part, is that like, I can remember those stories, and I would talk to you about it, right? Like sitting up on the parking garage in the middle of winter that you're like welding with like a tarp trying to cover you or whatever, and it was like snow blizzarding out, and like I would talk to you about that stuff while you were going through it, right? And it's like, it almost doesn't register,
Right. Dude, I remember that. Yeah, actually, to when you just mentioned that, it's like, oh man, I forgot about that. But it's, dude, you've been around for a while. Yeah, you know, it's really cool to see that. And what I love too, because I touched on this last episode with Paul, but it's like, you brought up like that whole idea of liking the effect produced by alcohol backs you in a corner, right? And it strips you from all of those explanations as to why this, why that, and it corners you in there and says, no, like, this is exactly why you're without defense against that drink. And it's like, I was the same way. And then going back through and like, reading the book and I just, like, when you said that, what I thought about too, it's like, it tells us, we have these moral and philosophical ideologies of like how life works and stuff, and it all goes down to self-knowledge will not save me. And it's just like accepting spiritual help to a spiritual problem, right? And it's like they found that out in the 1930s. And it's still true to this day. Like, modern science has not found a suitable cure. Vivitrol is not like, that's not. It's like, you know what I mean. There's all these things that like we have, but it's like still to this day the most effective is just a spiritual design of living with a practical program of action.
Totally. And I think a big part of that comes from one thing that taking those medications and stuff missed the point, right? Is that with this program, it's provided me with a purpose, right? And that's part of that comes from the spiritual aspect, right? Because I have to believe that there's something that is out there, right? There's something greater than me. And then it comes from the 12th step, is that I have to practice these principles in all of my affairs. So now I have to act like a decent person and put my shopping cart back every time, right? And then I have to carry this message to the still suffering alcoholics, right? So now I have a purpose of waking up every day, right? Is that now I'm doing something for the greater good, to pack into the stream of life,
I love that. Packing into the stream of life.
It's a quote from I think from your grand sponsor, honestly. It's been but that's, so like I totally appreciate where, like you said, we're backed into this corner, right? And then the tough part about it is like one of my favorite lines from the book is the either we're going to live on a spiritual basis or we're going to be doomed in alcoholic death, and they're not always easy.
Go on to the bitter end, blotting out our intolerable situation.
But they're not always easy choices, right? You tell somebody you either have to do good things and live on a spiritual basis, or you're going to die. Most people are going to be like, I'm going to live on a spiritual basis, but we're like, I need to go out for a year and experience what. And tying it to step 2, right, is that insanity, is that I'm going to be able to beat this by myself. I'm going to be able to find some way that no one else knows, right? And like I love, one of my favorite steps is step 2, right? Because I see it play out in my life, because I still have all of this insanity, right? But like one of my favorite aspects is that I don't know how to live life, right? I learned that I'm unmanageable in step 1. And then step 2, like, I don't know how to live life, and so I have to start paying attention to everyone else, right? Because if I'm insane, then I don't know how to do certain things, right? Like live life, or like I don't know how to be patient. I don't know how to be loving. I don't know how to be graceful. I don't know how to do these things, right? And so like, if I'm able to admit I'm insane and I don't know how to do these things, then I'm able to start looking at others, right? Reinforcing that we aspect. I'm starting to look at others to see how they live, right? And I see people in the program and I'm like, man, that one guy's got a ton of patience. Let me see how how do they go about it, right? I see this person that has a ton of grace. How do they go about it, right?
No. Dude, I'm so glad you just said that, because it's like a perfect segue. Because earlier in the episode, right, I was touching on, there was always, I always knew that I needed to be around you, right? There was always something in my brain that said, this guy has like the answer, he has what you need, right? And that's why it's like, I was like, I need to work with this guy, like, and you were like the consistent person that I would, when I was out and about and I was just showing up to meetings drunk and like crying to you, but, it was like, and I always knew it. And the sponsor that I work with now comes from a very similar group and background of you, and it's like, what I came to realize is that I always wanted peace, like in my life, right? And I just wanted to feel okay with being okay, and I wanted to feel like everything was like, I wanted to be fine, right? Like serenity, true serenity. Like it's not that I wanted life to just be perfectly peaceful all the time, because that's not realistic. But I just wanted to, even in times of chaos, to be okay, right? And that was like the main thing, was like, that's what I always truly wanted, but I just didn't know it, right? And I was just still trying to bludgeon my way through life with like all of these things that I was like, well, it's going to be the money, or it's going to be the job, or it's going to be this, or, whatever it was. But it's like, looking back on it, it was just like, I knew even then, like, that's what I had seen, right? It's like, I just wanted to be okay. And so this time around, like you said, find myself with no money, like break the lease on my apartment. Now the credit's fucked, like, and move back into sober living. And it was just like, I was given an opportunity to really like work this again and to try again. And what I find this time around is that my life is a lot more peaceful, and that I do find that I'm more content with like how things are going. But it was like, I knew that even back then. I was like, there was always some reason I was like, I need to work with this guy. I need to be around this guy. And
where do you find your peace now?
Honestly, I find my peace now.
No bullcrap answers either. I don't want you to give me the rehab answer. I want the real Eric answer here.
No, I mean, honestly, my life has taken a complete 180 from what it was, and I still to this day I struggle with people that I know from the past that still associate me with who I was. And the biggest way I find peace nowadays is that I have God in my life, that of my understanding. And I do genuinely wake up each day and try to use my time, resources, and everything else to pack into the stream of life. And like, I find that it's very comforting and peaceful, right? Where I'm not fighting against anything anymore. I'm just like living, right? Like I'm here and I'm a part of, and that's like, I'm just accepted for where I'm at. And it's not about any of these like external things. Like I genuinely just find peace in knowing that, It's tough to say, really. I'm kind of drawing a blank, but
that's okay. So it sounds like before you were trying to misplace your identity, and now you've found your identity.
Right. Yeah, you know, and it's like, it's more of just like, I don't feel like I'm not a part of.
Yeah.
You know, I feel that like I'm like a full participant in life these days.
Yeah.
And that's enough.
That's enough, right? There it is.
Right? It's enough for me.
You're at the dog park finally.
Yeah, you know? I am at the dog park.
You're with the dogs now.
Yeah, you know? And it's like that is, you know, it is enough, right? Yeah. And I don't have to be something that I'm not, and I'm okay with that these days. I'm okay with just being Eric. I'm okay with being flawed, and I'm okay with understanding that. On a societal standard or whatever, when I start going down those wormholes, I'm okay with being a sober living house manager
who likes Taylor Swift,
who loves Taylor
There
Swift.
You go. Sorry.
Yeah, had to throw that out there. Shout out Taylor. But it's like, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the fact that it's like, I don't have this like salary to like go out and like buy all these new things, but it's like, I'm okay with that. I find satisfaction, weirdly enough, in just the smallest things, like being able to just tidy up the house at noon on a Tuesday when everyone else is at IOP or like at work and stuff, and just be useful. Or like if, you know, Wade, the owner of the houses, needs me to help out somewhere, it's just like, I'm like that. I'm okay with that. Like it's like my life is so wildly different from what I thought I wanted it to be, but it's like I am genuinely content with where I'm at despite all of that. And I think a lot of that just has to do with I really do have God in my life these days, and like I don't just get online and talk about it. I don't just go to meetings and say things that sound good. It's like I genuinely do make an active effort, and I'm a full participant in my life, and that gives me the confidence to just keep doing what I do. Yeah. And something that I just never had before.
Well, and I think that comes from the humility process through the steps, right? Because like for me, I fought humility, and I fought my higher power for a while, right? Because I had all these different concepts, and I was struggling to find where, like, just like with myself, right? Because I had a different identity with every person I talked to. Overall, I was James the alcoholic, right? But I would be James the movie nerd. I'd be James the video game guy. I'd be James the, whatever, right? And so through that humility, so I struggled with my higher power because I was trying to give it this identity, just like I had all these different identities, right? And so through that humility process, I found out exactly where I was, right? It was through doing the steps, is seeing like, this is exactly who James is, And then once I was able to establish that, then it was like, I'm able to establish a higher power that fits what I need, right? And is what keeps me going, right? And I know that the awesome part about it, right, is that I hear you sharing about your identity and about doing this stuff and packing into the stream of life and having this kind of purpose and really being a participant in your life and in your recovery, right? And the awesome part about recovery in general is that I know for a fact that you and I have vastly different higher powers, right? And at the end of the day, though, and like not just different higher powers, but different recovery stories, different, addiction stories, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I'm able to identify with those feelings and those things that you have gone through, right? Yeah. And I love that because, like, without something, right? Without something, I'm going to be miserable when I'm sober, and I'm going to be miserable when I'm drunk, right? Because when I'm sober and miserable, I'm thinking I'm either the greatest thing or I'm the worst thing, right? And when I'm drunk, I'm thinking the same thing, and I'm always thinking there's going to be something that's going to fix that, right? And you don't have to feel that way anymore, and that just the littlest things, right, is what brings us to that.
Yeah, man. It's literally like I am living life in the dog park, man.
There you go.
I'm literally living life in the dog park, and let me tell you, everything that I need is provided for in my life, and there's not a whole lot of excess. And I'm telling you, and I've shared this with multiple people that are close to me. Our mutual friend Damon, he was on the pod.
Mine's way better this week too.
Yeah. Shout out to Damon. Oh, huge congratulations to Tanner too. We'll just shout it out on the pod.
Yeah. Tanner.
But yeah, dude, it's just, I find it mind blowing every single day how like satisfying my life is with what I would in the past consider as so little.
Yeah.
You know? It's a lot.
Well, I remember you saying, I want to live on this high rise overlooking everybody and like in this giant kind of 1-bedroom huge apartment, just overlooking all of the peons on the city, you know, then I'll be happy, right? And like I remember how frustrated you were that there were no guarantees. Right. I remember us driving home one time and you were talking about how frustrated you were about not having anything in life guaranteed. And I was talking to I guarantee you this light is going to like stay green or whatever as we were passing through. And and it's funny because now it's so different for you, right? Because now like your life doesn't have a ton of guarantees, but I've never seen you happier, right?
Yeah,
that's crazy.
It is wild, man, and I'm happy to like, you know, share this moment with you and kind of reflect on those things because it's just I never would have imagined, man. And it's like it's not all like rainbows and butterflies, right? And a big part of who I am right now, a lot of that had to do with cutting ties with who I was. Right. And that's something that's very difficult. Right. And I didn't handle it in the best ways in some circumstances. And this is very recent history, too. But I had these long-standing relationships with people that at the end of the day, when I was able to get honest with my sponsor and like, you know, pray on it and truly seek God's guidance, I, you know, truly felt like I needed to part ways with certain things, and that certain relationships that I had with people and these different things were no longer serving a purpose for what I wanted to be in life and where I wanted to go. Yeah. And that was very difficult for me. And, you know, I didn't necessarily handle it in the best way. And there are still some like amends and things that I need to go back and revisit because of how I handled situations. But you know, I do make decisions based off of who I want to be, and I don't let my past mistakes, I don't identify with them anymore. And I understand the concept of not regretting the past nor wishing to shut the door on it, but also, you know, growing in a spiritual way where I truly feel that the things that I'm doing today and the person that I am today is more in line with what God's will would be for me and not my own. And it's just that's been a tough process too. Yeah. So.
Well, and that's the beauty. One of my favorite aspects of sobriety is how freaking messy it is, right? Is that because a lot of the time we get up here and we you know, when we're sharing and stuff and we go to speaker meetings, we're sharing and like, you know, we were just at a meeting on Friday and someone was talking about how they felt like every time they get up, they're sharing about like how difficult things are and stuff like that. And it's like, that's what it needs to be, right? Is that like, if we got up here and we just sat and said, you know what, I was able to cut ties with these people, everything went really well, and like it was an awesome, easy experience, then like, man, that's not living life, right? Because it's supposed to be messy. It's supposed to be difficult. We're supposed to butt heads with our character defects and our fears and stuff like that, right? Because if we're not, then we're not believing that we're going to get through it, right? All we're doing is living in that comfortable life that we lived when we were alcoholics, right? And so I love hearing about like how difficult it was, right? And how there's things I could have done better, and there's things that I did right, and then you're able to look at it and say, wow, These things, absolutely, I need to clean up. But man, there's a few things over here that I reacted totally different, right? And realizing like one of the biggest struggles that I've had in sobriety was coming to terms with those character defects, right? But also acceptance, is because I thought acceptance meant like, oh, life is great. I'm like, everything that's coming my way is awesome, blah, 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 you know? But it's like acceptance in like not enjoying the situation can go hand in hand, right? Like I can accept what's going on, but still not not enjoy going through it, you know? I can still I run into this so much where I have to constantly check in with myself. Am I truly accepting this situation, or am I just shoving those feelings down? Because they feel very similar, right?
Yeah, and that goes hand in hand with even like forgiveness too,
totally.
Right? Where it's like, am I truly living in forgiveness here, or am I just suppressing this, but mentally I'm going to keep it in the back of my head to bring this up again?
Oh, totally.
You know what I mean? Like, am I just going to say it's okay in this moment, but then, you know, catalog this so that the next time this person, place, or thing no longer serves its purpose to me the way I think it should, I'm going to bring it back up.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, that's something that I've been working on a lot too, is the concept of like true forgiveness, right? It's like, am I actually going to identify what this person, place, or thing, what it's actually causing me to feel this way about it, address that situation, find my part in it, and then truly let it go and actually forgive that? Or am I going to say it's not a problem?
Maybe,
and then hold on to it.
Exactly. I think that's where, like, boundaries come into a big play, right? That's been the past year, is this theme in my life, is learning, because I'm a people pleaser through and through, you know, but learning how to love people with boundaries, right? And, like, for me, that's where the forgiveness comes in, is that, like, I have to know where that line is. Right? If I'm still having feelings about certain things, then I need to put that boundary up till I'm able to start getting over that stuff, you know? But man, us alcoholics, we struggle with that. We struggle with letting stuff go, right? Like, you know, like I said with the character defects, right? Like not being able to forgive is one of my big ones. And then, but I remember having a conversation with my sponsor last year about this, where I was like, man, like, how do I get rid of this, right? Like, I want to forgive. I want to love, you know, I want to do these right things and stuff. And he's like, just give it to God, man. And I got, oh gosh, that still like irritates me to this day, right? Is that like, I remember him saying that, and I got so mad. I made this big uproar. I was like, what does that even mean? Like, you can't just, what is just give it to God, right? And like, he had to dumb it down so far for me, and he just said, stop doing it, right? And so like with forgiveness, right, is that the only way for me to forgive is to just forgive, right? Like if I'm still having feelings and stuff being tied to it, then I'm not truly believing that like this thing has been removed, right? I'm not truly just acting like it's gone. I'm going to sit there and I'm going to stew on it. I'm going to hold on it. And like you said, I'm going to bring it out at the most opportune moments when I've convinced you that everything's fine. And then you do that one slip up, pulling that right back out.
Yep. That mental Rolodex is like, well, actually.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've struggled with it.
Yeah.
Did something happen recently?
Yeah, man. There's been God's given me plenty of opportunities, and I kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'll dig a little deeper. You know, the past couple months of my life, I've had major changes happen in my life. And they've involved some people that are very, very close to me. They're people that have been there for me through a lot of situations on my recovery journey and just in life in general. And there was a lot of things that I thought were lifelong friendships and lifelong relationships that I were going to have in my life. And there were just things that had come to light, and they weren't in line with what I wanted, and I knew it was one of those situations where it's like, you know what the right thing to do is, but you don't really have a leg to stand on. And so I found myself being an active participant in things that are totally against what I get on this podcast and preach, and they're totally against what God's will for my life would be. And I was actively participating in these things, and not just being an innocent bystander like I try to play it off like I was at the beginning. I was an active participant, and when push came to shove and things came to light, it got very messy, and there were, decisions that needed to be made, and, I made those decisions, right? And that's what I was talking about. Looking back on it, there was a lot of things where I didn't handle correctly, and I became, retaliatory, and I became combative with things, and I started trying to protect my own pride and ego by justifying my part in situations instead of just trying to reduce harm, induce more harm in situations by airing out. Like I said, they're looking back on it, right, and working through it. There were a lot of I did cause some damage that and with the right time and opportunity will need to be addressed, but to circle back to like forgiveness, right? I had to first, in order to even forgive the people involved in that situation, I had to first fully understand the situation and understand what my part in it was, right? And stop trying to go back to my default mode of that I was a victim. I wasn't necessarily that big of a part in it. No, I was, and there was a lot of things that are on both sides of that situation. I knew both parties and had personal relationships with both people that were involved, and I actively decided to sit on the fence and be one guy to one person and another guy to another, and then when dirty laundry got aired, decided to try to play the victim how it is. And that's something that I carry with me to this day. It's something that I carry with me, and I'm not proud on how I handled that situation. But that's another thing where it's like, okay, I understand what hurt me in that situation. I understand what harm I caused in the situation and the part that I played in it. And when the time comes and I have an opportunity, I am prepared to clean my side of the street, own up to that, and handle that situation so that I can truly forgive and move on. And and then in the past couple of weeks, I've had another person that was super close to me, just wanted to come on board, help me out with some things, and then situation kind of got a little messy. They decided they wanted to go on and do their own thing, and I carried resentment. It caused.
I can hear it still.
Yeah. It did. Yeah. It did. And this one's a lot more fresh, but it's it did cause a resentment because I feel and it talks about this in the book, right? Where the most dangerous thing is when I feel justified in my resentment, right? Yeah. And that is. It's a dubious luxury for people that aren't, for non-alcoholic people. But for me, the grouch and the brainstorm, it's not for me, right? And that's what I have to understand when it comes down to it. But that situation really did cause a resentment because I felt like, I had done nothing up until that point to try to be of use to this person and to help them out, and then to. In my point of view, right? I feel like I was betrayed. I feel like, when I start projects, they're very personal to me, and I kind of touched on that, right? And it's I really do pour everything that I have into what I start doing. And I took it as a personal attack. I took it as someone trying to steal my project. They're trying to steal my vision. They're trying to steal all these things from me. And I made it all about myself, right? And in doing so, copped a huge resentment that required a 2-hour 10th step with my sponsor of breaking down. No, you're not upset because of what they did. You're upset because you identify this podcast and this project as yours, and you identify them as an extension of you, and it's a lot of pride and ego, right? And so it's just that's the beauty of it, though, is being able to just keep that transparency and understand that I'm not perfect. perfect, but I am able to just continuously use the program of action to address situations. So when the time does come, I can own up to my side of things and amend them the best way that I can, so I can forgive that situation and move on. But
exactly. And like how
sorry,
much,
I talked.
No, I love it. I'm
Yeah.
fine with just sitting here listening. How much time sober do you have, Eric?
May 13th, so however long ago that was.
There you go. So this is the just funny part of alcoholics and addicts, right? Is that like you're sitting there and you're like talking about how you could have handled this situation better, blah blah blah. Like I was playing both sides. I was sitting on the fence. I was trying to play the victim. I was doing all this stuff, right? And it's like 5 minutes ago, you were talking about how spiritual everything and how God's there and all this stuff. And like, I love it because like that's spirituality at its finest, right? Is that like it's being able to go through life, right? And be able to sit there and like, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to engage in those character defects. And I don't even really like referring to them as character defects, but they're coping and survival skills, right? Is that like, that's what I had to use to stay alive to that point, right? And it's not going to go away within 6 months of being sober, right? And it's like, the book says, that we don't get rendered white as snow, is that it's a constant process. And that's the beauty of spirituality, is that I'm constantly searching for those moments of peace and serenity and just constantly making mistakes and acknowledging that that's a part of life, right? Is that like, if I take away one aspect, like for me, this kind of goes back to the higher power thing, is that like, for me, my higher power is that natural stream of life, right? Is that if I take away one aspect, whether it's fear or happiness or hope or anger or anything like that, if I take away one of those aspects, then I'm no longer living life, right? And so as you're going through this beautiful process of you just being a total douchebag, like, it's amazing because, we got it off again. Yeah. That's okay. But as you're going through this beautiful process, you're able to finally, for the first time in your life, be able to make an action, decide on an action, take that action, and then live with the consequences, right? And it fractured these relationships, and it caused these troubles and problems and that internal strife and the external strife and all this stuff, right? But at the end of the day, you're not going and drinking over it. And that's awesome. That's spirituality just boiled down to this ugly goo of what it is, right? Yeah. Is you're just living life. And now it's like, now you either have gone through enough pain and you're deciding like, I'm not going to go through that crap again. I'm going to act differently in these kind of things. I'm going to set these boundaries. I'm going to communicate this. I'm going to do, and you're going to do it differently. Or you're going to just go through that bubbling goo of grossness of pain, Yeah. But that's what you have to go through. And that's the beauty of it, because if I didn't go through this stuff and I was just sitting up here talking about how great life was, and I was talking about how easy it's been and how all of this stuff, I'm not progressing spiritually. Yeah. I'm not developing that deeper connection. I'm not developing that deeper connection with my fellows, because now I see you in a much better light. And it's terrifying because when we admit this kind of stuff, we're like, people are going to judge me. They're going to say that I should have been better. I should have done this different, all this different stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like going through that fourth and fifth step, or that eighth and ninth step, or those defects, is sitting there and seeing, man, I see who you are. And I fucking love it. There's my one F-bomb.
There it is. That's awesome, man. Well, we have successfully overheated our camera
twice,
a couple of times, that's a good sign, man, because when I get going in a good conversation like this, I mean, these episodes could go on for 3 hours.
I love it, honestly. Yeah. And like two good alcoholics, we love our own voice, so we'll just keep talking.
I love talking about myself.
Yeah, my favorite person to talk about is me.
Yeah, I'm my favorite subject.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I write poetry, and when I do, I always look back on it, and I'm like, God, that's so profound. I totally relate to what I wrote.
Yeah. Yeah. This
This is it. You know.
Well, James, I mean, thank you, man.
No, I really appreciate you allowing me on, and I can't stress to you or the audience enough the amount of growth and how that you've gone through, and how much of a blessing, how much of a privilege it's been to get to go through that journey with you. You know, every day, every week, I try to tell you at Friday Night Lights, I've been kind of slacking on it, but like how proud I am of you, you know, because like us alcoholics, we don't feel like we deserve the life that we're given when we get sober, you know, and it's good to know, like, you know, somebody's proud of us, and I'm proud of you. You've come a long way, and thank you for letting me be on this. This is awesome. I'm super sweaty, but luckily they're not gonna be able to tell.
Yeah, the garage. Next order of business. Let's get a fan in the garage.
Definitely.
No, but we do appreciate it, guys. A quick reminder: podcast is brought to you by Plugged In Recovery. So if you or somebody you love are looking for a safe, licensed, sober living home, both male and female in the Chandler Mesa area, give Wade a call, 612-505-5494, or visit www.azsober.com to check out the houses and see if we can be a good fit for you. James, thank you again for coming on, man.
Yeah, and don't forget to like, follow, and share.
Like, comment, and subscribe.
Yeah, I've always wanted to say that, so thank you for allowing me.
Like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate it. We'll see you next week.